very requested guest.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. People are always like, you got to have Dr. Claud Anderson on. You got to have Dr. Claud Anderson on for years.
Yes.
People have been saying that.
Well, you know why? I've been paying them well to ask you that.
Is that what Powernomics is?
No, Powernomics is specifically dedicated to trying to inform black folk and trying to elevate them to a higher level of competitiveness in the society and overcome the primary legacies of slavery and centuries of Jim Crow semi-slavery in the South. We're in a very dangerous situation in this country as black folk, and this next year going to be our last chance to get out of it.
I thought you about to say it's going to be our last year period. I wouldn't doubt that either.
That's pretty close. You're in a very dangerous situation. After all my years in politics and national politics and international politics, that's why I left government, saying that somebody got to get out here and start raising Cain on behalf of black folk.
What did you do in government? What did you do in government?
Oh, I was Assistant Secretary of the United States Department of Commerce, the first black. I was also a chairman for economic development for governors. Also, I was only black to be appointed to be over the government's property disposal program, which means my signature alone, I can give away all kind of federal property to anybody. And also I was educator for over the entire state of Florida education system for about 8 years. And so I've been around the bond for a long time, but I finally dawned on me that somebody got to get out here and start raising Cain on behalf of black folk.
Now, how do we catch up? You know, we're so far behind. How do we catch up to make sure that we can play in the same game or even on the same field?
Well, the first thing I had to do is go back and correct what we've never done. In all my years in national politics and international politics, for most of the people you all are very, very familiar with in name, they never addressed the primary problems of black folk. Our primary problem was not social integration or civil rights. The primary problem is you never corrected the legacies and burdens of slavery. See, the whole point of slavery was to do what? They never asked that. It was to socially engineer black folk into the lowest level of a real-life monopoly game. And what means that they maldistributed almost 100% of all this nation's land, resources, rights, privileges, businesses, and controls of all levels of government into the hands of the dominant white society. Black folk haven't got a snowball's chance of ever being a competitive people. You might struggle and last another 2 or 3 years, but it's going to wipe you out pretty soon. You came out of slavery in 1860 having 1/2 of 1% of this nation's wealth. Here you are 150 years later, guess what? You still own 1/2 of 1% of the wealth. And in a nation, in a race-based society, it is what you own and control that determines your equal opportunities and your rights and privileges. It's had nothing darn thing to do with civil rights. That's a waste of time. It doesn't have anything to do with the voting, but that's an intellectual masturbation process. Ain't gonna do any good. What you need is own and control wealth and power.
They said intellectual masturbation. I heard you say that earlier on something I was watching. You said they get off, but it does nothing for them.
You got it down pat, bro. That's like you starving to death. Somebody give you a steak, you rub it outside your stomach. They ain't gonna do you any good. They ain't doing a damn thing for you. You know, I said, no, quit playing with black folk. So when I left the president, I ran a campaign, I guess. Well, let me go back. I guess I've been very privileged in all my years. Now I'm 85 now, so I reached the peak. I don't have to get along with anybody damn body anymore.
Man, that's a beautiful feeling.
You know,
yes, sir.
That's one of the enrichments of age. But I decided after all the years of playing politics, I guess I was privileged in the sense of being the only black in the nation that ever was a campaign manager, not in a campaign manager, but a campaign manager for governors, for presidents, for attorney generals, for state legislators, and congressmen. No other blacks had that. I felt for that reason I had an obligation to get out here and do something for black folk. And so I don't play any games with black folk. Most of the friends I know that you all probably have on your shows, they're just trying to get some self-indictment elevation. I don't need it.
Now, what did you think about Kamala Harris and Cory Booker? I know you said voting is an illusion.
They're probably nice people. They ain't gonna do anything for black folk. You say I have yet to this day ever heard or seen not one president, not one candidate for a public office ever get up and say, here's what I'm gonna do for black folk. That violates the entire premise of politics. Politics is a process that decides who's gonna get what benefits out of life. It's based on a very simple premise of quid pro quo. Politics, as you know it now, never existed until about the 1500s. And it says we will determine who gets what blessings and who suffers. And so, consequently, nobody's ever stood up and say, here's what black folk are going to get. You're talking about the candidates. The first thing these black folks should be asking is not what candidate you're going to represent or going to vote for. Who cares? What you should be asking is, what are you going to get? What are you voting for?
That's right. What are you going to get in exchange for your vote?
That's right. What do you get? What are you voting for? What are you going to get? If you ain't getting a damn thing, why are you voting? And see, black, and not one candidate in all the years I ran campaigns, not one candidate or one president or one party, political party, neither the Republican or the Democratic Party, Libertarian Party, Green Party, not one has ever promised that if I get the black vote, here's what I'm going to do for black folk.
It's the first year it's ever happened, and I think the only reason it's happened is because of all the hell that's being raised on social media. And, like a lot of times when these presidential candidates come up here, we ask them specifically, what is your black agenda?
See, you're right. And what did she say to you?
Well, I mean, they all have little things here and there. The only person I've seen have a real live black agenda is Mayor Pete. He has the Douglas plan, which is based off Frederick Douglass. Okay,
right. And see, what most of them, what they're going to do is give you that old game that they used during the formation of this country in 1789. Mm-hmm. And they met up in Philadelphia and says, we're gonna build this nation, and we're gonna create a document that make us the cradle of democracy. It's gonna be a constitution. And they said, and we're gonna make this a land of opportunity and freedom for everybody.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So they met in Philadelphia for a whole week. You know what they did for a whole week? They closed the doors and put the guards on the windows in Philadelphia, and said, "Now we gotta write this Constitution, but we got a problem now. If we're gonna offer this as a land of opportunity for everybody, isn't it inconsistent and hypocritical for us to be getting ready to enslave all these damn black folk we're bringing into the country? They said, how are we gonna get past that? They said, well, what we'll do, we'll run a game on them. They've been running that same game ever since. What we'll do in the Constitution, we use very broad and ambiguous terms. And certain terms, certain of those broad ambiguous terms would apply to whites and certain apply to black folk. So in the United States Constitution says, we the people, all the people, all God got a God-given right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Initially, it wasn't even happiness; it was really a property, because black folk are going to be property. And so that's what it was structured on. And they said, well, what about black folk? When they read the Constitution, they said, what we'll do, let's use other words. Let's use code words like those who are indebted, those who are in bondage, those who are property, those are 3/5 of a human being, mm-hmm. those who are equal to a field animal. And our people never figured that out. Mm. So you got all our civil rights leaders running around for years and running for public office like you're talking about we got rights. You don't have any rights in the Constitution. There's no rights for blacks in the Constitution. You got the United States Constitution in 1789 was strictly the first affirmative action plan in the country, strictly and solely for whites. Mm. And those who later on could pass for whites. That's what it's about. Mm-hmm. And black folk are the only people in this country that can't pass for white. And when I left the White House with President Carter in 1970, the Office of Management and Budget says, we're now going to make everybody in here that comes into the country, we're going to start qualifying them as being white. See, up to 1970, as an example, Hispanics were always white. They were always whites. Mm-hmm. But what happened in 1970, I was over education for the state of Florida at that time, and I have the dubious honor of writing the second affirmative action plan in the United States, but the first one for black folk. When I wrote the affirmative action plan, it was approved by the governor and the state cabinets, the systems, but I didn't write it for minorities and poor folk, those broad terms, people of color, and for diversity, and for gays and lesbians and midgets and humpbacks and one-eyed people. I wrote it strictly for black folk.
So listen, is there any way that blacks can correct the resource imbalance?
Yeah, you can. See, and you start playing the game. That's why my second book, I wrote the first book called Black Labor, White Wealth, and which Ebony Jet calls the second Bible for black folk around the world. It sells all over Europe and into Africa. That was to show you every technique, every trick, every custom, every policy that the major white society used to lock black folk into a lowest level of a real life monopoly game. And they maldistributed all the resources, period. It showed us that in very graphic terms. I think you got to have a copy of that bottom book over there.
Yes, sir. Black Labor, White Wealth.
That's what that was for.
We got dirty little secrets. We got more dirty little secrets.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Now, this is what they call it around the world. They call this the second Bible for black folk. Mm-hmm. It shows you exactly what happened to you, and that you have no rights. And power. I follow that with Powernomics.
I did. Oh, it's behind you.
Yeah.
There you go. Boom.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and this is a national plan. What was the question you just asked me? I ran past it. You asked me.
How do we catch up as black folk?
How you catch up? This is a national plan for black folk. It says a national plan to empower black Americans, period. And what you first thing you got to do, to make it long story short, you got to have what you never had in this country. That's a group self-interest. You've been inculcated and coordinated and brainwashed and believing that you got some obligation and responsibility to save the world. You got to save everybody first before you save yourself. Now, I'm a pilot. I don't fly anymore. I'm too old to be flying. But one of the first things I would tell people on my plane as passengers, the first thing you do, if we lose cabin pressure,